I've heard you say something to the effect that the term soulmate, has made you very successful and other lawyers successful in their career field. Why do you believe that?
Well, it's kind of what I said earlier that I think that a person you marry or you're in a long term relationship with, they're supposed to check a bunch of boxes. There's a bunch of boxes to be checked. But the concept of a soulmate, as I understand it, and as I think a lot of people interpret it, is that a person should be a 10 out of 10 in every one of those categories. And if they're not, well, you screwed up. Because the same thing I just said, hey, there's 8 billion people in the world. Like there's got to be one out there that checks all the boxes in all the categories perfectly. And look, maybe that's true. I don't know. But like, I just think if that's the standard, if the standard is that this person's got to be a 10 out of 10 in all the categories, that feels to me like, wow, like that is that's a heavy lift, and I don't think I expect that in any relationship in life. Like, so I don't know why you'd expect it in your romantic relationship that like there's almost no person, animal, anything in your life that you go, nothing about that is anything but perfect. Like and by the way, if you're saying everything about that is completely perfect, I think you need to take a close look at whether you're being honest, because like that's like rose colored glasses of to the 99th degree. If you're looking at a person saying they have absolutely no flaws of any kind, they are absolutely perfect in every way. I'm not saying, by the way, I think there is something to be said for you're perfect just the way you are, which is flawed. Like that's different. Like I think we're all perfect. Like I think we're all perfect. We are all the way we're supposed to be, and we're all works in progress, and we all have wonderful things and terrible things about us. And I believe that. I believe we are imperfect and perfect in our imperfection. But that's not what most people mean when they do the like this person's perfect. Like they're not perfect. They're not perfect, and you don't want them to be. Like I don't want anyone to think I'm perfect. If somebody said like you are perfect, okay, you need to get your head examined because I am not perfect. I might be perfect for you. That's lovely. If what you're saying is, I just find in the totality of you that it adds up to wonderful. Okay, I'll take that. That's great. That's a great recipe for a nice connection with someone. But, perfect is the opposite of good. It's the enemy of good. And I forget which book it was, maybe the Brothers Karamazov, where he says, that now that we are not perfect, we could be good. And that's a nice thing to be, to give yourself permission and not be perfect individually or even in relationship, but to be able to be good, to do your best at it.
Are you ever out at like dinner or at events and you're just thinking to yourself like, man, this relationship's not going to last. This marriage is certainly going to fail. Do you have like your antennas on with that stuff?
I do. I don't mean to, but I do. Yeah, I do. I actually correctly predicted every one of the divorces in the first season of The Real Housewives of Orange County. I watched the first season when it was on, like before the Housewives craze began. I watched it and I remember saying I think it was to my ex-wife, I remember watching it and going, they're definitely going to get divorced. Yeah, they're definitely going to get divorced. I was right about every single one of them. I mean, partly because they all got divorced, but yeah, I mean, I see cracks where maybe other people don't see cracks. I mean, it's not hard when something fails 56% of the time. You can kind of throw darts in the dark and at a list of names, and you're going to more likely than not hit one. But yeah, I think I've got a pretty good radar for it. I think I wouldn't be able to do my job well if I wasn't someone who's something of an empath and it's sensitive. I think I'm good at reading people's emotional state. That's a blessing and a curse, because I think it would be nice to not be able to read that so well. I have to read people for a living, and I have to attach to their emotional state as best I can so I can get into their head and be able to tell their story. And I have to be able to get into their spouse's head to figure out what the counter story is to my story. And then I have to figure out how to weaponize each of those things. And I figure out how to get into the judge's head and persuade them. So I have to put myself in a lot of people's heads a lot of the time. And so that's hard to try. That's why when you said, like, if you're ever at a party or out to dinner, I'm rarely at either of those things. Like I don't go out to dinner and I don't go to parties. Like I don't I always tell like when friends say like, "Oh, we're getting married," I'm like, "Cool. If you invite me, I may or may not show up. If you don't invite me, I'll give you a much larger present. Like I'll send you a check. Like I have a very interactive job, and when I finish doing it for the day, I'm done. Like I'm happy to just unplug. And on the weekends when I'm not working, I work most weekends. When I'm not working, I have a place in the middle of the woods on 30 acres, and I'm just there unplugged, because I prefer that. And then back to it, the intense interpersonal stuff the rest of the time.
What were some of the things that you saw in these relationships on the Real Housewives show that you mentioned that that stuck out to you that you were like, all right, this is happening. They're treating them like this. Like, what were some of the things you saw?
Some of it, they're different opposites. So if a person is just really, really critical of their partner, that's always a red flag. Or if a person is wildly, overly effusive about the perfection of their partner, that's another red flag because it's like, it means they're delusional essentially, or they're trying to like, if someone's telling me how happy they are all the time, after a little while, I'm like, okay, like if you're that happy, just go be happy. Like you don't have to keep telling everybody how happy you are. I think the more people feel they have to advertise how happy they are, the more I question whether they're happy or not. Because genuinely happy people are off just being happy. They're not like looking to advertise it to the whole wide world and be very performative about it. So anytime I see the like couple that's on social media with like hashtag blessed all the time, hashtag greatest husband ever, hashtag, I'm like, okay, I don't know who that's for. Like, are you trying to convince yourself? Are you trying to convince the rest of us? Like, what are you trying to, don't look over here. On the Housewives too, I also feel like on those particular franchises, you have a lot of really materialistic people. I represent a lot of ultra wealthy people now. I represent a lot of high net worth people, and I can tell you that there is definitely a correlation between, extreme wealth and extreme unhappiness, particularly relational unhappiness, relationship based unhappiness. I think that money offers real solutions to imaginary problems and imaginary solutions to real problems. A lot of times, especially too, a lot of the Real Housewives are like nouveau riche, like they didn't come from money. They were broke and then they, were entrepreneurial or they married into money. That's something that I think people really struggle with when it happens to them. Because I think when you grow up without money, money becomes a symbol of everything you didn't have. Like if I had just had money, I'd feel safe. If I just had money, I'd feel secure. If I just had money, I'd be loved. If I just had money, I wouldn't feel ashamed of anything. I would just feel great all the time. And then you get money and you go, oh, it's just money. Like it makes some things easier. You get some nice things, but they're just things. Like they're not, you get like an amazing car, it's really cool for a couple of weeks and then it's just your car. You get an amazing watch. It's like, oh, look at my watch for a little while, and then it's just a watch. So you just get used to it. And so I think when you watch those shows where people are performatively showing you how wealthy they are and how happy they are, and it's like an arms race of conspicuous consumption and materialism and how happy they are and how successful they are. I think that's a recipe for disaster in relationships. And I think time has proven that. I mean, I don't know what the divorce rate among Real Housewives is on Bravo shows, but it's got to be in like the 80-90%. I mean, that is like a almost guaranteed divorce rate there if you on a long enough timeline. So.
So if you're saying that you've seen there's a strong correlation between people who have a lot of money and their level of unhappiness, yet I imagine, like we've talked about, the connection is like the main thing that drives the success of a relationship and marriage. But I think somewhere up there as well is money impacts marriage and relationships. So where do you draw the line between money being important for a couple to remain stable, but like also not letting it make you severely unhappy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think anything in a relationship, I would actually take that question on a bigger tack and say that anything becoming too much is bad, right? Like anything. So sex is important, but if sex is everything, you're going to have a problem. Money is important, but if you make money the centerpiece of your relationship, it's going to be a problem. I think everything has to be given appropriate attention and priority. Nothing is insignificant, but nothing should be everything, right? Like people have a tendency with money to either overestimate the value of it and what it's going to be able to give them, or grossly underestimate its importance and leverage themselves in ways that cause tremendous stress in their relationships. So I think healthy balance, healthy balance is everything. We suck as a culture at moderation in anything. Like we are a culture that treats dandruff with decapitation. Like we are not a culture that's good at moderation. We don't want to hear it with moderation. Like we don't want to hear it. It's like we want to do CrossFit. We don't want to get told, yeah, like 20, 30 minutes of exercise, some cardio and some resistance training. Like we don't want to get told, we want to be told, like, just do this cabbage diet and inject this drug into your abdomen and you're going to be healthy. We don't want to be told, like, yeah, just like eat moderate, mostly plants, lean proteins, you're good. Like we don't like the honest answer, like, crypto, invest in this crypto that's going to be okay. You don't want to, yeah, tax free, municipal bonds that are, triple tax free. They're kind of boring. They're going to steadily return like 3-4%, which tax impacted is like closer to 9%. People don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear, like, you want to know what's the secret to saving your marriage. What weird hack is there? You don't want to hear, like, yeah, like, just be like a little bit nicer to your partner, be kinder, try to notice them, try to compliment them occasionally, treat them with the love that you would like to be treated with. Like, this is not a sexy answer. So people are not as interested in it, like money is important. Of course it's important. Anyone who says otherwise is being ignorant. Like money represents certain security. It prevents certain kinds of stress. It creates certain opportunities that facilitate happiness or create opportunities for happiness. But money can't buy happiness. Anybody who says that's just, it's just garbage. Like, listen, it'll distract you for a while, but at the end of the day, it can't solve some of the biggest problems. Like you get cancer, you can buy good medical care, but you can't buy your way out of cancer. You can't buy a cure. You can buy, comfortable position. You can buy a really nice toilet. You still have to use the toilet like every other human being. Like you're human, and so you have to, I think, be honest with yourself about what you can really control for and what you can't. And I think that money is one of those areas where people just put stuff on it emotionally that's so dishonest.